That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we show that behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Elena gripped the steering wheel of her old Ford, the engine ticking like a weary heartbeat as she pulled into the lot of Sunset Storage. The sun hung low over the flat sprawl of the industrial outskirts, painting the chain-link fence in bruised oranges and purples. Distant traffic hummed on the highway, a constant reminder of lives rushing forward, while hers felt stuck in neutral. She glanced in the rear view at her daughter, Mia, asleep in the back seat, thumb tucked against her cheek. 8 years old, all gangly limbs and dreams Elena could barely afford to nurture anymore. It had been 2 years since Javier's accident, the semi that swerved too late, the hospital bills that swallowed their savings like quicksand. Now, with the mortgage looming and Mia's school fees piling up, Elena had scraped together her last $300 for this gamble. Storage unit auctions weren't her world. She was a part-time cashier at the local diner, the kind of place where coffee stained your apron and tips came in loose change. But the online ads promised hidden treasures in forgotten spaces, and desperation had a way of rewriting your story. The facility was a maze of corrugated metal doors, each one a silent sentinel under the buzzing fluorescent lights that flickered to life as dusk deepened. The air smelled of warm asphalt and rust, with an undercurrent of dust kicked up by the evening breeze. Elena's boots crunched on gravel as she stepped out, her heart thudding against her ribs. The auctioneer, a grizzled man with a clipboard and a voice like gravel, nodded toward Unit 47. "Last one of the night," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Owner defaulted 6 months back. No one's claimed it." She'd bid impulsively, her hand shooting up when the price dipped to $250. Now, standing before the padlock, its chain thick and unyielding, she wondered if she'd just thrown away Mia's lunch money. The door loomed, dented in places, as if something heavy had been shoved against it from inside. Elena fished the new key from her pocket, the metal cool against her palm. Her fingers trembled as she inserted it, the click echoing in the empty corridor like a judgment. The door groaned open on hinges that protested the intrusion. Dim light from the overhead bulbs spilled in, revealing shadows that danced across stacked shapes, not the chaotic jumble she'd imagined. No furniture shrouded in sheets, no boxes of faded clothes. Instead, the unit was filled with tubes, giant plastic cylinders, each about 5 feet tall and 2 feet wide, lined the walls in neat rows. Transparent, like oversized test tubes from some mad scientist's lab, but industrial. Sealed with heavy caps that gleamed dully under the fluorescence. There were dozens of them, perhaps 50, their surfaces fogged with condensation, as if breathing in the stale air. Elena stepped inside, the concrete floor cold through her thin soles. The smell hit her then, chemical, sharp, like bleach mixed with something organic, almost earthy. She reached out, her hand hovering over the nearest tube. Inside, through the haze, she could make out vague forms, dark, elongated shapes suspended in a clear liquid that sloshed faintly when she tapped the plastic. What the hell? Her mind raced. Medical waste. Some kind of experimental equipment from a shuttered lab. The auctioneer hadn't mentioned anything like this. Units like this were supposed to hold forgotten lives, photo albums, tools, maybe a few antiques if you were lucky. A chill crawled up her spine, unrelated to the dropping temperature. This didn't feel right. Not junk, not treasure. Something deliberate, hidden away. She imagined the previous owner, faceless, urgent, wheeling these in under cover of night, sealing the door and vanishing. Why? And why leave them here to rot? Mia's voice pulled her back. "Mom, what's in there?" Her daughter stood at the threshold, rubbing sleep from her eyes, the car's interior light casting her face in a soft glow. Elena forced a smile, stepping out and relocking the door with a decisive snap. "Just some old stuff, Mika. We'll check it tomorrow. Let's get you home." She couldn't let Mia see this, not yet. The weight of it pressed on her chest as they drove away, the unit shrinking in the mirror like a secret she'd unearthed too soon. Home was a sagging duplex on the edge of town, the kind where porch lights buzzed and neighbors kept to themselves. Elena tucked Mia into bed, the girl's questions fading into yawns. "Promise you'll tell me what it is," Mia murmured, clutching her stuffed bear. "Promise," Elena whispered, kissing her forehead, but as she closed the door, doubt flooded in. In the kitchen, under the harsh light of a single bulb, she spread out the bills on the table. Electric overdue, Mia's braces payment stamped final notice. Javier's picture smiled from the fridge, his eyes accusing her of chasing shadows instead of stability. She sank into a chair, the vinyl creaking under her. What if those tubes held nothing, worthless plastic, a scam that would leave her worse off? Or worse? What if they were dangerous, hazardous materials, something the law would seize, dragging her into questions she couldn't answer? She pictured police lights flashing in the lot, social services eyeing her parenting. Mia deserved better than a mother tangled in someone else's mess. But then, unbidden, hope flickered. What if it was valuable? Rare equipment from a biotech firm, something she could sell legally, turn into a fresh start. A down payment on a better place, maybe even classes to become a nurse, like she'd always dreamed before life derailed. Javier would have told her to take the risk, his laugh echoing in her memory, warm against the night's chill. Sleep evaded her. In the dark bedroom, Elena stared at the ceiling cracks, the hum of the fridge a distant echo of the facility's lights. Those tubes haunted her, their glassy stare, the liquid's subtle sway. By morning she'd know, or maybe she wouldn't open them at all. Pretend the auction never happened, walk away clean. But deep down, she knew she couldn't, not with Mia's future hanging in the balance. The door was open now, metaphorically at least, and whatever lay behind it demanded she face it. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Elena's duplex, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. She hadn't slept more than a few fitful hours, the tubes invading her dreams like silent guardians in a fog-shrouded lab. Mia was already up, rummaging through the cereal box with the enthusiasm only a child could muster on a school day. Elena watched her from the doorway, the girl's laughter a fragile anchor against the pull of uncertainty. "Mom, you look tired. Did the storage thing keep you up?" Mia asked, milk dribbling down her chin. Elena managed a nod, pouring herself a cup of weak coffee. "Just thinking about work, that's all." Lies came easier these days, a shield to keep Mia's world small and safe. But as she dropped her daughter at school, kissing her goodbye through the open window, promising tacos for dinner if the diner wasn't too slammed, the weight settled heavier. The drive to Sunset Storage felt like a pilgrimage, the highway blurring past in a haze of exhaust and morning haze. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles whitening. What if she turned around, sold the key back to the auctioneer for whatever scraps he might offer? But no, the 300 was gone, and with it her last buffer against the bank's calls. The lot was quieter in daylight, the sun beating down on the metal roofs, turning the air thick with the scent of heated tar and faint ozone from the power lines overhead. A lone maintenance worker swept gravel near the entrance, his broom scraping rhythmically against the ground. He was an older man, wiry with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve, eyes sharp under a worn cap. Elena avoided his gaze as she walked the corridor to Unit 47, her boots echoing off the concrete. The door stood as she'd left it, padlock glinting mockingly in the light. She paused, hand on the chain, the metal warm now from the sun. A bead of sweat traced her temple. This was it, no more delaying. The lock clicked open with a familiar snick, and the door rolled up smoother than the night before, as if the unit had been waiting. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the rows of tubes in stark relief. They stood like soldiers in formation, their plastic walls clearer now, less fogged by the cooler night air. Elena stepped inside, the space feeling smaller, more confining under the daylight scrutiny. The chemical smell was stronger too, mingled with a faint briny undertone, like seawater left too long in a bucket. She moved closer to the nearest tube, her breath shallow, heart pounding in her ears. Through the transparent wall, the liquid inside gleamed, a viscous pale blue fluid that caught the light in subtle ripples, and suspended within it, not just shapes, but forms, human-like, elongated, curled in on themselves as if in deep sleep. Limbs, faint outlines of torsos, heads bowed. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. They weren't mannequins or dummies. The details were too organic, too eerily lifelike. Skin tones varying from pale to shadowed, hair floating like seaweed in the current. Were they bodies? Preserved specimens? Her mind reeled, flashing to late-night documentaries about medical oddities, black market experiments. But this wasn't a lab. This was a forgotten corner of suburbia, where people stored lawnmowers and holiday decorations. She circled the unit slowly, peering into tube after tube, dozens, each holding one or two figures, some small, child-sized, others larger, adult proportions. No labels, no tags, just the sealed caps and the relentless hum of the facility's ventilation somewhere distant. The floor around the bases was scuffed, as if heavy equipment had been used to position them, and faint water stains marked the concrete like leaks from a hasty setup. Elena's stomach churned. This couldn't be legal. Hazardous, dangerous. She imagined hazmat teams swarming the place, questions about how a diner cashier ended up with, whatever this was, evidence of something unspeakable, a rogue clinic, a cult's relics, or worse, victims of some unspoken tragedy. Backing away, she bumped into a stack of smaller crates tucked in the corner, overlooked in the dim light last night. They were wooden, splintered at the edges, lids pried but not fully open. Dust motes danced in the beam of sun slicing through the door. With trembling fingers, she lifted one lid, the wood creaking like old bones. Inside, files, yellowed papers bundled with rubber bands and glass vials, empty but etched with faded markings. Cryo Solutions, Inc., one label read in peeling ink. Cryogenics, frozen in time, waiting for a thaw that never came. Elena's knees weakened. She sank against the wall, the cool plastic of a tube pressing into her back. The previous owner, had they been a scientist fleeing debts or scandal, or someone desperate, storing dreams of immortality in a place meant for the mundane? The sound of footsteps jolted her. The maintenance worker appeared at the threshold, broom in hand, his face creasing in curiosity. "Ma'am, you the one who bought 47? Saw you pull up." His voice was gravelly, laced with the local drawl, eyes flicking past her to the tubes. He froze, colour draining from his weathered cheeks. Jesus, what in God's name? Elena straightened, wiping her palms on her jeans, words sticking in her throat. I don't know. Auctioned off. Thought it was junk." She gestured weakly, the air between them thick with unspoken dread. He stepped in cautiously, peering at a tube, his breath hitching. "Name's Hank. Been sweeping this lot 20 years. Seen all sorts, furniture, cars, even a damn piano once. But this?" He shook his head, tapping a cap lightly with his knuckle. A faint slosh echoed inside. "Looks like some kind of medical setup, cryo-freeze or something. My cousin worked at a lab in the city years back, said they tested this on animals, but humans? That's fringe stuff, illegal in most places." Elena's pulse raced. "You think it's, people?" Hank met her eyes, his gaze steady but kind, the kind of look that came from hard miles. "Don't know, ma'am, but it ain't right leaving it like this. You call the cops yet?" She shook her head, fear coiling tighter. Cops meant reports, investigations, Mia's face in some social worker's file, but ignoring it. That felt like complicity in whatever ghost story this was. Hank nodded slowly, leaning his broom against the wall. "Look, I ain't one to pry, but you seem like a decent sort. Got a kid? This could blow up bad. Maybe we peek a bit more, see if there's papers explaining it, then decide." Together, they pried open another crate, the lid splintering under Hank's calloused hands. More documents spilled out. Invoices from a now-defunct company dated 5 years back, shipping manifests for specimens preservation units. No names, just codes. And a single photo tucked in an envelope, a man in a white coat, smiling beside a row of similar tubes, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. The deeper truth hovered just out of reach, turning Elena's gamble into a moral quagmire. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the figures within, she realized the real risk wasn't the contents. It was what she'd do with the secret they'd unearthed. Hank's words hung in the thick air of the unit, the slosh from the tube he'd tapped still echoing faintly in Eleanor's ears. She stared at the photo in her hand, the man in the white coat, his smile strained, like a mask cracking under pressure. The background showed a sterile room, rows of tubes identical to these, but brighter, more alive with purpose. Cryo Solutions, Inc. The name tugged at something buried in her memory, a news blurb from years ago about a startup pushing boundaries in preservation tech. Whispers of ethical lines crossed before it all went quiet. Bankrupt, scandal, or just faded into obscurity. She couldn't recall, but the chill in her gut told her it wasn't a happy ending. "Put that down, ma'am," Hank said softly, his voice pulling her back. He'd moved to the next crate, easing the lid up with a pry bar from his tool belt, the wood splintering with a dry crack that made Elena flinch. Dust billowed out, catching the sunlight in swirling motes, and she coughed, waving it away. The smell intensified, that briny edge sharpening into something almost metallic, like preserved fish in a market she'd visited as a kid in Mexico, before Javier and the life they built here. Hank rummaged carefully, his thick fingers sifting through papers that crinkled like autumn leaves. Invoices, contracts. Looks like shipments from some warehouse upstate. Dates go back to 2018. Company folded around then, I think. Heard rumors, experiments gone wrong, folks suing over side effects. Elena leaned in, her shoulder brushing his arm accidentally, the contact grounding her amid the swirl of panic. Side effects? She glanced at the tubes again, the figures inside suspended in their eternal pause. Were they volunteers? Desperate souls betting on science to cheat death, or something darker, unwilling participants in a dream turned nightmare. One tube caught her eye, closer to the back, the form inside smaller, fetal-curled, with wisps of dark hair fanning out like Mia's after a bath. Her throat tightened. "This isn't right, Hank. What if they're alive? Or were? God, what if opening these wakes something up?" He straightened, rubbing his jaw, the stubble rasping under his palm. His eyes, faded blue from years under the sun, held a quiet wisdom, the kind earned from fixing leaks and listening to tenants' sob stories. "Ain't no waking from that deep freeze without proper gear, but yeah, it's wrong. Feels like stumbling on a graveyard." He pulled out a thicker folder, bound with a rusted clip, and flipped it open on a nearby crate. Schematics spilled across the surface, diagrams of the tubes, notes on fluid composition, saline, cryoprotectants, temperatures hovering just above absolute zero. Technical jargon swam before her eyes, but one page stood out, a handwritten log scrawled in hurried ink. Subject 14, stable, family notified, payment pending. Risk of cellular damage increasing, must relocate before audit. Family notified, the words pierced her. These weren't just objects, they were people, or echoes of them, with loved ones out there, maybe still waiting for a call that never came. Elena's mind raced to Javier, how she'd clung to every doctor's update in those final days, bargaining with fate. What if this was someone's unfinished vigil? Or worse, a cover-up? The company defunct, the owner of the unit vanishing with the keys to this frozen vault. Stolen, hidden evidence of malpractice. Her hands shook as she traced the log's entries. Dozens of subjects, coded numbers instead of names, but hints of lives. Artist, 42, teacher, 29, one even mother, seeking extension for child. The sun had shifted, slanting through the door in a harsher beam that threw long shadows across the tubes, making the figures seem to stir, though they didn't. Sweat beaded on Elena's forehead, the unit's air growing stuffy, oppressive. Outside, the distant hum of a truck rumbled past the fence, a reminder of the normal world ticking on. But here, time felt suspended, mirroring the contents. "I can't keep this," she whispered more to herself than Hank. "The police, they'd shut it down, take it all. But what about Mia? If this ties back to something illegal, they'll dig into me, my job, our home. It could all unravel." Hank set the folder down gently, his broom forgotten against the wall. He'd seen her pull up with the kid in the car last night, pieced together the desperation in her bid. Life's thrown you curves, huh? I get it. Lost my wife to cancer 5 years back. Watched her fade while bills stacked like cordwood. Swept this lot to keep the lights on for my boy. But hiding from truth? That eats you worse than any cop's questions. He paused, glancing at the tubes with a mix of pity and resolve. "Let's open one cap, careful-like. See if there's IDs inside, something to trace. If it's clean, maybe you contact the State Health Board first. No sirens, just facts. If not, well, you decide then." Elena hesitated, her fingers hovering over a cap near the front, the smallest tube, the one that reminded her too much of Mia. The plastic was cool, slick with condensation, and the seal gave way with a soft hiss, like a breath released after years held. A puff of chilled vapor escaped, curling around her wrist like a ghost's touch. Inside, the liquid didn't spill. It was contained, viscous, holding the form steady. She reached in gingerly, fishing out a small metal tag dangling from a chain around the figure's neck. It clinked against the side, cold as ice. Engraved, Subject 22, Elena Vasquez, Dobe, 1985. Consent form, signed 2017. Her name, not hers. Another Elena, but the coincidence hit like a slap, blurring the lines between stranger and self. The figure was a woman, mid-30s maybe, face serene in repose, lips slightly parted as if mid-whisper. No visible scars, no signs of struggle, just preservation's eerie peace. Attached to the tag, a folded note. "For my daughter, wake me when it's time." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, hot and unbidden. This wasn't crime, it was hope deferred, a mother's gamble on tomorrow. Hank whistled low, reading over her shoulder. Vasquez. Common name. But this? It's human, all right. Tragic. He closed the cap gently, sealing it back with a twist. "You got a choice now, Elena. Walk away. Sell the unit as is to some scrap dealer who won't look twice. Or chase the truth, find families, give closure. Ain't easy, but it's right." The moral crossroads loomed, sharp as the unit's edges. Call the authorities and risk the fallout, or dig deeper with Hank's steady hand. As they stepped out into the blinding midday light, the door rattling shut behind them, Elena felt the weight shift. Not just fear, but a spark of responsibility for the frozen lives inside and her own. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the storage lot, turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze that distorted the chain-link fence in the distance. Elena shielded her eyes with one hand, the other still clutching the metal tag like a talisman or a curse. The name etched there, Elena Vasquez, burned into her palm, a mirror to her own weary reflection in the unit's door. She slipped it into her pocket, the chain cool against her skin, a secret weight that pulled at her steps as she and Hank walked back toward the office. The gravel crunched underfoot, each sound a reminder of the fragile normalcy outside those walls. Hank wiped his brow with a rag from his pocket, the fabric stained with years of grease and sweat. "That note hits close, don't it?" he said, his voice low, as if the tubes might overhear. They paused by a row of vending machines near the entrance. The hum of the compressor, a faint echo of the facility's underbelly. Elena nodded, leaning against the metal frame, the vibration traveling up her arm like a pulse she didn't want. Her mind replayed the figure's face. Peaceful, almost maternal, lips curved in what might have been a smile frozen mid-bloom. "For my daughter, wake me when it's time." The words twisted in her chest, conjuring Mia's laughter from breakfast, the way her small hand had waved goodbye at school drop-off. What kind of mother would she be if she buried this, or if she chased it and dragged them both under? "I need to see more," Elena said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "Can't decide blind." Hank studied her for a moment, then nodded, tossing his rag over his shoulder. "Fair enough. But we do it smart. No rushing. My shift ends in an hour. I got tools in the truck. Meet back here?" She agreed, watching him shuffle off toward the maintenance shed, his silhouette blurring in the heat. Alone, she slid into her Ford, the vinyl seats hot against her thighs. The engine coughed to life, and she drove aimlessly for a bit, circling the industrial loop until the diner's striped awning came into view. Work called, her shift started soon, but her thoughts were miles away, tangled in that blue fluid and unspoken consents. The afternoon dragged in the diner, the sizzle of burgers on the grill, and the clink of plates, a monotonous rhythm that did little to drown the churn in her gut. Customers came and went, truckers nursing coffee, locals with newspapers folded to the classifieds, none aware of the vault of secrets she'd unlocked. Eleanor's hands moved on autopilot, refilling mugs, wiping counters sticky with syrup, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. When her break came, she stepped out back, the alley reeking of dumpster rot and cigarette smoke from the cook's furtive puffs. She pulled out the tag, turning it in the dim light filtering through the fence. Subject 22, DOB, 1985. The same year as her. Coincidence or some cosmic joke? She snapped a photo with her phone, the flash harsh against the metal, then tucked it away. Evidence, she told herself. Proof she wasn't imagining the nightmare. By late afternoon, she was back at Sunset Storage, the lot emptying as workers clocked out, their pickups kicking up dust that hung in golden shafts. Hank was waiting, his truck backed up to Unit 47, a toolbox and flashlight in hand. The air had cooled slightly, carrying the tang of ozone from an approaching storm cloud on the horizon. They reopened the door together, the metal rattling like bones in the quiet. Inside, the tubes cast elongated shadows across the floor, the figures within seeming more defined in the slanting light, veins faint under translucent skin, hands folded as if in prayer. "Start with the crates," Hank suggested, his voice a murmur. "Documents first, then maybe another cap if we find leads." They worked methodically, spreading papers on a cleared space near the door, invoices piled up like accusations, shipments from Cryo Solutions to private clinics, payments routed through shell accounts, notes on voluntary preservation trials for terminal patients. One manifest listed origins, donors from across the state, some from as far as the coast. No police reports, but a memo caught Elena's eye. Audit imminent. Relocate sensitive units to secure off-site. Owner, Dr. Marcus Hale. The man from the photo. His address was smudged, but a phone number lingered, disconnected when she tried it on her cell. The automated voice, a flat denial. Deeper in the stack, a letter emerged, typed formal, but edged with desperation. To whom it may concern. These units represent the last hope for 47 individuals who trusted us with their futures. Financial collapse forces this storage, retrieval planned upon restructuring. Do not disturb. Signed by Hale, dated just before the company's fold. Elena's breath caught. Not stolen then, not a crime scene in the violent sense, but abandonment. Ethical quicksand. These people had signed away their todays for tomorrows that never arrived. Families left in limbo, wondering if their loved ones were lost or lingering in some corporate limbo. Hank pried open a third crate, this one heavier, revealing sealed vials of the blue fluid and a laptop, battery long dead but hard drive intact. We could take this to my place, charge it up, he offered. But Elena shook her head. Too risky. What if it's tracked? Or worse, what if opening it wipes everything? The storm clouds thickened overhead, thunder rumbling distant, mirroring the turmoil in her chest. She moved to another tube, larger this time, the figure inside a man, broad-shouldered, face etched with lines that spoke of hard years. Her fingers hesitated on the cap, then twisted. Another hiss, another tag. Subject 09, Robert Klein. Doe B 1972. For my son. Tell him I'm fighting. A wallet clipped inside, faded photo of a boy on a bike grinning toothless. Tears blurred her vision now, hot tracks down her cheeks. These weren't experiments, they were pauses, desperate bids against the inevitable. Javier's face flashed, his hand in hers during chemo, promising he'd wait if he could. I can't just leave them, she whispered, but calling the cops. They'll destroy it all. Labs, inquiries, Mia in the middle. Hank knelt beside her, his presence solid, unjudging. Truth's a double-edged blade, Elena. Call 'em, and you lose control. Feds swoop in, maybe condemn the lot. Ignore it, and you're guardian to ghosts, waiting for whoever left this to come knocking. Or... We trace Hale, quietly. Find if he's out there, get the families involved. Give 'em a say. The crossroads sharpened, each path laced with thorns. Outside, the first rain pattered on the roof, a soft drumbeat that swelled into a downpour, sealing them in with the suspended lives. Elena zipped the wallet away, sealing the cap with care. Courage wasn't charging in. It was choosing the hard light over easy shadows. As water sheeted down the door, blurring the world beyond, she met Hank's eyes. We trace him, for now. The decision hung between them, fragile as the vapor still curling from the tube, a step toward clarity or deeper into the unknown. The rain had eased to a drizzle by the time Elena and Hank stepped out of Unit 47, the door clanging shut behind them like a verdict. Water pooled in the gravel, reflecting the bruised sky overhead, and the air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and ozone, cutting through the usual tang of rust and oil. Elena's jeans clung to her legs, damp from the downpour, but the chill inside her ran deeper, rooted in the tags and notes they'd unearthed. She locked the padlock with hands that still trembled faintly, the metal slick and cold. Hank stood beside her, toolbox in one hand, the laptop from the crate tucked under his arm like contraband. My truck's over there, he said, nodding toward the shadowed edge of the lot. We'll dry off at my place, get this thing charged, no sense poking around in the wet. She followed him, the crunch of their boots on gravel the only sound breaking the post-storm hush. His truck was an old Chevy, faded blue with dents from years of hauling scrap and regrets. Inside, it smelled of pine air freshener, masking faint motor oil, the seats worn soft from endless shifts. Elena slid into the passenger side, the laptop on her lap a leaden weight, its surface cool against her thighs. As Hank started the engine, a low rumble that vibrated through the frame, They pulled out onto the access road, the storage facility shrinking in the side mirror, its fluorescent lights flickering to life against the gathering dusk. "You live far?" she asked, her voice small in the cab. "Not far. Trailer park off Route 12. About 10 minutes. Quiet spot. My boy visits weekends." Hank's eyes stayed on the road, wipers swiping lazily at stray drops. He didn't push for her story, but the silence invited it, heavy with shared secrets. Elena stared out the window, the highway's sodium lamps blurring past like distant stars. Mia would be home soon from after-school care. She'd promised tacos, a simple anchor in the chaos. But now, with the tube's ghosts riding shotgun, normalcy felt like a lie she couldn't sustain. What would she tell her daughter? That Mommy found sleeping people in a box, waiting for a wake-up call that might never come. Hank's trailer was nestled among a row of similar units, chain-link fences sagging under climbing vines, the air thick with the neighbor's barbecue smoke, even in the rain. He flipped on a lamp as they entered, the bulb casting a warm glow over a space lived in but tidy. Faded photos on the walls, a worn recliner facing a small TV, the hum of a fridge in the kitchenette. Elena set the laptop on the coffee table, its dust bunnies scattering like fleeing thoughts. Hank plugged it in with an extension cord snaking from the wall, then busied himself with mugs of instant coffee, the steam rising in lazy curls. "Black okay?" he asked, handing her one. The bitterness grounded her hot against her palms. The laptop whirred to life with a groan, the screen flickering blue before stabilizing. No password, sloppy or hasty abandonment. Files bloomed open, spreadsheets of subject data, grainy videos of insertion procedures, emails threaded with urgency. Eleanor scrolled, her heart thudding. Dr. Marcus Hale's name threaded through it all, chief researcher, signer of consents, the man whose photo had stared back with hollow eyes. One email chain caught her, frantic exchanges from 2018, investors pulling out, regulators circling. Preservation viable for short-term only, long-term cellular degradation inevitable without funding, Hale wrote to a colleague. Families must be informed, but the board, they want silence. Hank leaned over her shoulder, his breath steady. Bastards. Treated 'em like inventory. A video file loaded next, shaky footage from what looked like the company's lab, white-coated figures wheeling tubes into a van under cover of night. Hale's voice narrated, clipped and tired. Unit 47 transfer complete. Secure until retrieval. These lives depend on us. The timestamp matched the letter they'd found. No violence, no screams, just quiet desperation, the kind that built in boardrooms and broke in storage units. Elena paused the video, the frozen frame of a tube being loaded hitting too close, the slosh of liquid, the glint of a tag. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, Mia texting from the sitters. "When home? Hungry?" Guilt twisted like a knife. Elena typed back quickly, promising soon, then set it face down. "He was trying to save them," she murmured. "Hale hid them here to buy time, maybe sell the tech later, but he vanished. What if he's dead or running?" The deeper truth unfurled. Not a mad scientist's lair, but a failed promise. 50 souls, or whatever remained of them, betting on science's edge, families scattered, unaware their vigil was stored in a dusty corridor. Compassion warred with fear. These weren't criminals' cast-offs, but echoes of her own grief, Javier's hand going limp in hers. Hank rubbed his chin, the stubble rasping. "We got his last known address from the files. Small town up north near the labs. I can drive you tomorrow if you want. Check property records online first, see if he's listed." His offer hung simple, no strings, the kindness of a man who'd swept away enough messes to know when to lend a hand. Elena nodded, but doubt clawed at her. Digging deeper meant time, risk, phone calls to strangers, perhaps stirring old scandals that could trace back to her unit. Her name on auction logs, The police would be cleaner. One call, hazmat teams, experts deciding fates. But then what? The tubes destroyed as bio-waste, families never knowing. Mia's future tangled in red tape, Elena branded as the finder of forbidden fruit. She stood, pacing the narrow space, the carpet muffling her steps. Outside, crickets chirped in the damp night, a normalcy that mocked her turmoil. If I call the cops, it's over. Safe but empty, like closing the door on Javier all over again. Tears welled, unbidden, and she wiped them with the back of her hand. Hank rose slowly, placing a weathered palm on her shoulder, brief, fatherly. You're carrying more than tubes, Elena, but truth don't stay buried. For those folks inside, and your girl, chase it right, or it'll chase you. The laptop screen dimmed to saver mode, a cascade of data points flickering like distant hopes. Elena pocketed the tag from Subject 22, its chain a reminder of shared names, shared stakes. Tomorrow they'd trace Hale, quietly with Hank's steady compass, but as she drove home through the misty streets, Mia's excited hug waiting at the door, the crossroads loomed sharper. Protect her peace, or open the frozen hearts to the light they deserved. The rain-slicked road reflected her headlights, splitting paths in the dark, and for the first time, fear yielded to a fragile resolve. The morning broke grey and sodden over the trailer park, the sky a low ceiling of clouds that pressed down on the sagging roofs and puddles mirroring the muted light. Eleanor had barely slept, the laptop's revelations churning through her night like a relentless tide. Hale's emails, the consents signed in hope, the families left dangling on threads of what-ifs. Mia's questions at breakfast had been light, innocent. What's for dinner, Mom? Can Hank come over? Elena had smiled through the fog, promising spaghetti, but her mind was already miles north, chasing shadows of a doctor who'd played God and lost. Hank met her at the storage lot by 8, his truck idling with a throaty rumble, exhaust curling in the chill air that smelled of damp concrete and distant rain. He'd printed scraps from the files overnight, addresses, phone traces, a faded obituary clipping for a colleague of Hale's that hinted at suicides in the wake of the scandal. Last known for Hale's a cabin off Lakeview Road up in Pine Ridge, he said, handing her a thermos of coffee as she climbed in. The cab was warmer than expected, the heater blasting stale air laced with his aftershave, a simple anchor in the uncertainty. Eleanor nodded, cradling the thermos, the heat seeping through to her chilled fingers. No makeup, no pretense, just jeans and a hoodie, ready for whatever ghosts awaited. The drive north wound through scrubby hills, the highway giving way to narrower lanes flanked by pines that whispered in the wind, their needles shedding droplets like tears. Silence stretched between them at first, broken only by the swish of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional crackle of Hank's radio tuning static. Elena stared out at the passing landscape, faded billboards for motels long closed, a roadside diner with a flickering open sign, the ordinariness a stark contrast to the frozen world they'd left behind. "What if he's there?" she asked finally, her voice barely above the engine's hum. "What do I say? I bought your cryogenic secrets at auction?" Hank chuckled softly, the sound gravelly but kind. Truth, straight. Folks like him, scientists, dreamers, they carry guilt like lead. Might be relieved someone's knocking. His hands gripped the wheel steady, knuckles scarred from years of wrenches and regrets, and Eleanor felt a flicker of gratitude for his quiet solidity. The way he didn't push, but simply steered. Pine Ridge emerged as a cluster of weathered cabins hugging the lake's edge, the water slate grey under the overcast sky, lapping at docks splintered by time. Hale's address was the last on a rutted drive, a squat A-frame half hidden by overgrown ferns, its roof patched with mismatched tin that rattled in the breeze. The air here carried a sharper scent, Pine sap mixed with mildew, the faint rot of leaves decaying underfoot. No car in the drive, no smoke from the chimney, but a mailbox overflowed with flyers, yellowed and curling. Elena's heart thudded as they approached, the gravel path crunching like brittle bones. She knocked on the door, the wood echoing hollowly, while Hank hung back, scanning the windows for movement. No answer. The knob turned freely, unlocked, a careless invitation or long abandonment. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and neglect, light filtering through grimy panes to illuminate a space frozen in disarray. Papers strewn across a table, a coffee mug ringed with old stains, a calendar stuck on 2019. Elena stepped in cautiously, her boots scuffing the worn floorboards, the air thick with the musty tang of forgotten time. Hank followed, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom to reveal bookshelves sagging under volumes on biology and ethics, titles like The Ethics of Immortality mocking from the spines. They moved to the table, Elena's fingers trembling as she sifted through the chaos. Notes in Hale's scrawl, diagrams of cellular repair, frantic jottings about funding pleas mirrored the laptop files. Deeper in, a drawer yielded a ledger. Names, finally, matched to codes. Subject 22. Elena Vasquez, artist from Sacramento, terminal cancer, signed for her daughter Sophia, age 6. The entry ended abruptly. Relocated to secure storage. Contact family pending revival protocol. A phone number scribbled beside it, local area code. Elena's breath hitched, the coincidence of names now a tether pulling her in. This Elena had fought for more time, just like her, scraping for Mia's tomorrows. Hank found a photo album in the corner, its cover warped by damp. He flipped it open gently, the pages sticking with a soft rip. Pictures of Hale younger, beaming beside patients, smiling faces, tubes in pristine labs, families clustered hopeful. Later shots darkened, empty boardrooms, Hale alone, eyes hollowed by shadows. The last page, a newspaper clipping. Cryo Solutions shuts down amid lawsuits. Dated months after the storage drop, no mention of Hale. Vanished perhaps to this isolation, wrestling demons in silence. "We call that number," Elena said, voice firming despite the knot in her chest. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like impatient fingers. Hank nodded, pulling out his phone, but hesitated. What if they don't believe? Or worse, they want it all back. Tubes, files, your unit. The moral weight pressed heavier now, the cabin's confines amplifying it. These weren't abstract secrets. They were lives paused, families fractured. Calling meant upending worlds, hers included, with Mia's stability at stake. But silence. That condemned the subjects to true oblivion, erasing their gambles without a whisper. She dialed, the ring echoing tinny in the quiet. A woman's voice answered on the fourth, wary, elderly. "Sophia Vasquez, this is about your mother, Elena Vasquez." The words tumbled out, halting at first, then steady as she explained the auction, the unit, the tag. Silence stretched, broken by a gasp, then sobs muffled by a hand. "She's preserved? All this time? I thought she was gone for good, after the company folded." Sophia's voice cracked, laced with grief and fragile hope. The doctor promised updates. Nothing. Dad died waiting. Elena's eyes met Hank's, tears blurring the room's edges. Sophia lived nearby in the next county, clinging to a faded portrait of her mother. "Can we meet? Show you proof?" The agreement came swift, a cafe in an hour. As they drove away, the cabin receding like a shed skin, the stakes escalated. One family notified, but dozens more in the files, teachers, fathers, dreamers, all. The police loomed as the safe harbor, but this path, with Hank's guidance, offered redemption, reuniting echoes with their anchors, legally transferring the units under ethical oversight, perhaps even reviving protocols if science had advanced. Yet fear gnawed. Hale's absence screamed unfinished business. What if he returned, claiming ownership? Or if the state seized everything as hazardous, destroying the hopes inside? Rain began again, pattering on the windshield, blurring the road ahead. Elena gripped the dash, resolve hardening amid the storm. For the first time, the tubes felt less like a curse and more like a bridge to compassion, to the quiet justice of unfinished stories. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The cafe on the edge of Pine Ridge was a relic of better days, its neon sign buzzing faintly under the persistent drizzle, casting a pinkish glow across the parking lot, pocked with puddles. Elena and Hank arrived first, sliding into a vinyl booth that creaked under their weight. The air inside thick with the scent of frying onions and stale coffee brewing in a pot that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Doris, poured their mugs without a word, the steam rising like hesitant breaths. Elena's hands wrapped around hers, the heat a small comfort against the knot of nerves twisting in her stomach. Outside, the lake's grey expanse stretched beyond the window, waves lapping softly at the shore, mirroring the uncertainty churning within. Sofia Vasquez pulled up in a battered sedan 10 minutes later, her steps hesitant as she pushed through the door, bell jingling like a warning. She was in her early 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face lined with the quiet wear of years spent wondering. Elena stood, heart-pounding, and extended a hand that Sofia ignored, pulling her into a hug instead, fierce, trembling, the kind born of long-buried grief. "You found her?" Sofia whispered, pulling back to search Elena's eyes. "After all this time?" Hank stayed seated, giving them space, his presence a steady anchor at the table's edge. They talked in hushed tones over untouched plates of pie, the words spilling like rain from a clogged gutter. Elena laid it out, the auction, the tubes, the tag with her mother's name etched in cold metal. She showed the photo on her phone, the serene face suspended in blue, and Sofia's breath hitched, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She was an artist, you know. Painted these wild landscapes, said she'd wake up to finish her series for me. Cancer took her quick, but the doctor, Hale, promised this cryo thing could pause it. We signed everything, paid what we could. Then silence. Dad searched for years before he passed. Sofia's voice cracked, fingers tracing the screen as if she could reach through. Is she still her? Or just a shell? Hank cleared his throat gently, sliding the ledger across the table. Shell or not, she's waiting. Files say the tech held short term, but experts now might know more. We traced Hale's cabin, empty, but his notes point to families like yours. Dozens. Sofia nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin that shredded under the pressure. The conversation turned practical, voices lowering as they weighed paths. The police would mean chaos, federal oversight, perhaps destruction of the units as unregulated experiments. But a medical ethics board, or a non-profit specializing in abandoned cryo cases, Sofia knew of one from online forums, could handle it quietly, legally. Document, notify, transfer. Elena felt the moral fog lift slightly, the weight shifting from curse to duty. By the time they parted, Sofia clutching copies of the files, promising to loop in a lawyer friend, the rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and washed clean. Elena and Sofia exchanged numbers, a fragile thread connecting their lives across the chasm of namesake coincidence. Driving back south, the highway unspooling under tires slick with moisture, Elena stared at the dashboard, the green glow of the clock ticking forward. That was right, Hank said, breaking the silence. One step, the rest follows. His words settled like ballast, and for the first time the tubes felt less like intruders and more like entrusted souls, their pause demanding her courage to bridge. The days blurred into a measured urgency. Elena took leave from the diner, her boss grumbling but understanding after she spun a vague tale of family emergency. With Hank's help, they photographed every tube, every document, sealing the unit tighter than before with additional locks from his shed. Sophia's lawyer connected them to the Cryo Legacy Foundation, a small outfit in the city dedicated to ethical retrievals from defunct programs. Experts arrived discreetly, a pair of white-coated specialists with clipboards and portable scanners, assessing the units under the facility's dim fluorescence. The air hummed with their equipment, a low whir that drowned the distant traffic as they confirmed viability, cellular integrity holding, though revival odds slim without advanced protocols. No crime, they ruled, just abandonment. A civil matter now. Elena documented it all, her phone filling with notes and timestamps, a digital testament to integrity over impulse. Families emerge from the files like ghosts stepping into light. A retired teacher's son in Ohio, a soldier's widow in Texas, each call a mirror of Sophia's raw hope. Some wept, others raged at Hale's ghost, but all thanked her. The single mom from the outskirts who'd bought their lost ones for a pittance. Legal claims followed. The auction made the contents hers, but she waived ownership, facilitating transfers to secure facilities. In return, a modest settlement from the foundation, enough to clear the mortgage, fund Mia's braces, and bank a cushion for the future. No windfall, but a foundation, solid as Hank's steady gaze. Months passed in quiet rebuilding. Elena enrolled in night classes for medical assisting, the campus lights a beacon after Mia's bedtime stories. The diner shifts eased, replaced by purpose, volunteering with the foundation, helping other finders navigate moral mazes. Hank became a fixture. Sunday barbecues at her duplex, his laughter filling the yard as Mia chased fireflies. The three of them, a makeshift family forged in rust and resolve. He fixed the sagging porch without asking, his tools clinking like old friends, and in quiet moments shared stories of his wife, the grief easing in the sharing. One autumn evening, as leaves skittered across the storage lot like forgotten whispers, Elena returned to Unit 47 alone. The tubes were gone, wheeled away to climate-controlled vaults where families could visit, ponder revivals in labs brighter than this dim corridor. The space echoed empty now, concrete swept clean, the air stripped of chemical bite, only dust and faint oil lingering, the buzz of fluorescence a solitary hum. She stood at the threshold, hand tracing the dented door, the metal cool under her palm. Once a vault of fear, it was now a monument to risks taken, doors opened not for greed, but grace. Sunset bled orange across the chain link, the highway's hum a distant song of lives in motion. Elena smiled faintly, pocketing the key she'd kept as memento. Javier would have been proud, the quiet courage that turned desperation to dignity. As she walked away, boots crunching gravel, hope settled deep, not in frozen pauses, but in the warmth of choices made true. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of the giant plastic tubes. See you in the next one.